Good morning. I'm absolutely delighted to be here at Coffee Club with TEDx, and I want to introduce you to Andrew McCracken, who's the Chief Executive of the Community Foundation for Northern Ireland. Andrew, it's an absolute pleasure
to
see you in person.
Yeah.
You and I know each other really well.
You're really my boss, Maeve, is the way I like to think of it.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's kind of awkward for me, I suppose, in a way, but it's an absolute pleasure for me to be the chair of the Community Foundation, and you and I have worked together for nearly 5 years now, but we've never done an interview on
anything
camera.
like this, no, so I'm sure we'll be all right.
Yeah, we'll be fine, and we have drank coffee together,
yes,
so
thank
you very much for coming to Loaf Pottery in Crawfordsburn as well. It's your first visit, and I hope it won't be the last.
It's great so far, thank you, Maeve.
Good, okay. Well, Andrew, we've had a chat about this beforehand, but one of the things I suppose that I'm really interested to talk about today is to find out a bit more about you and your leadership journey, and that how you've ended up where you are today, and some of your thoughts about your leadership style.
Yeah. Okay, well, where to start? It's lovely being in Crawfordsburn. My school bus used to go right past here on the way home, and so I know Crawfordsburn from going through it lots and lots and lots. So, where do you start thinking about your leadership journey? I think the thing I was most thinking about coming here was values and the different
it's
values
a very good
that
place
I have.
To start.
And I, as you know, spent quite a lot of time thinking about my values. In fact, when you start to work for me, one of the things that I do is I sit down and go through a little presentation that is, here's some of my values, here's why I am the way I am, and what I know about myself. Which I did with you when we started to work together. So one of those that takes me back to just after school, and I've been thinking a lot about it, is I've always articulated as justice is one of my values.
Okay.
Like I'm really driven by this sense of fairness. And that's because just after school, just after university, I travelled in the developing world for the first time. So I went to Nepal and spent a month there. A friend invited me and I had no idea what I was in for. But it gave me this really clear, unpleasant picture of the world that up until then there was me and all the people who I knew, and we lived in this kind of band, but that actually in terms of where I sat in the world, I was up here in the top.
It's with a bubble, really, when you think of bubbles.
And that actually there was this deep unfairness in the world that was kind of invisible to me until then, and that I hadn't really seen about. And one of the reasons that I've been thinking about that a lot is I would never have used this word for it then, but the word privilege is knocking around a lot at the moment.
It is, yeah.
And so I've been thinking about a journey from generosity to justice to privilege. So generosity being that we all start with this sense of I want to do something to help. It's good to do something to help people, and with the Community Foundation, that's what we're all about. That we facilitate people's generosity. People come to us and say, listen, I really want to try and make some kind of difference in the world. How do I do it? But that for many people, there's a journey from there to justice, this sense of actually me just doing my thing isn't enough. The system's broken, the world's broken. That quote, I don't know if is it Oscar Romero who said, when I pull people out of the river, they praised me as a saint, but when I asked who was pushing people into the river, they called me a communist. And that thing of moving to justice is a more edgy place to be. But the privilege thing, I think, is saying, actually, am I part of this system? Am I complicit in the fact that the system's broken? Crawfordsburn is a nice place. I lived in Bangor, went to a lovely university, and would never have thought of myself as being somebody with power. But I think somewhere in my motivator as a leader is this sense of privilege. So I'm talking lots, but I grew up in a Christian faith, and it's still really important to me. And Jesus says this thing about for those to whom much has been given, much will be expected, and that lives in the back of my head quite a lot. The sense of I've been given a lot.
Yeah.
So what's expected of me.
It's a very good voice to have in your head.
Yeah.
I think it's certainly driven you or directed you to where you are today then. And I think one of the very special things about you, Andrew, and I think we've talked about it before, is your contemplation and your thoughtfulness. So I really appreciate your honesty in relation to that as well. And I think it's, it makes sense for you to be in the foundation now. And you and I have worked together for quite a while in the foundation, but what I would know you for in the foundation is managing quite a significant change process. And I wonder if you could talk us through a little bit about that, because there was difficult times and easy times, but you have a unique leadership style as well. And I'm really keen on you telling us a little bit about, the shaping you've done in the foundation and where it is now.
Yeah, I will do. Although you should tell me a bit about what you see, because it's something that's really built into me is you can't see very much of your own self without people reflecting it back to you. And that's one of the things built into my leadership style right through doing change processes in place like the Community Foundation is doing 360 feedback all the time. Some people think too much, but it's really important to me. Because I have a real sense of if I don't know myself and know how people are perceiving me, then how can I make any change in the world? So in the foundation, like the Community Foundation is this amazing organisation. It's been around for 40 years, has been pivotal to so much progressive work in Northern Ireland, peace building and funding distribution, really amazing stuff. And when I joined, it was at a kind of closing of one season and starting of another season. And that meant letting some things go and saying those were brilliant and we were the only people who could have done that and it was the right thing for us to do it. But they're now things that are coming to an end and going on that journey of, so what should we be doing? Where should we be going? And I don't know. I'll describe what I think my style is in that, and you can tell me because you've seen it, but I don't really like going in with the answers.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely not the kind of leader who can turn up on day one and go, right, everybody, I was thinking about this over the weekend, and here's what we're going to do. And the idea of being that kind of leader slightly petrifies me. But going in with curiosity and questions and encouragement and caring and doing a little bit of then trying to put that in a nice diagram for people. So saying
that is another special
It is a special skill of mine. But saying, listen, I've listened to lots of you. We've listened to people outside, and we're trying to distill it down now into something clear about where we're trying to go. What is that? And for the Community Foundation, that's been about connecting people who care to causes that matter. It's been about both the people who care, encouraging generosity bit, and about still being at the cutting edge of the causes that matter, trying to be on the front foot of thinking, well, what are those causes in Northern Ireland? What, if you're trying to make society a better place, where should you be putting your energy and time and impact into?
I think that's a really good place to move on to the conversation about giving. And you'll know one of the things I'm particularly passionate about is that money touches the side, and that idea of wealth and money and funds in Northern Ireland going, as you said, to the causes that matter. And one of the things that I'm most proud of in the foundation is that riskier giving and donations to do. So tell us a little bit about that, because it would be quite easy just to fund the usual suspects, wouldn't it? Although the sector and those organisations need supported as well. But the foundation's been very brave in looking at riskier areas as well.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's been part of our DNA, I think, since it started.
I think you're right.
So my understanding is that the first few years of the foundation, right in the heart of the troubles of the conflict, was saying to people, listen, go out and find people who seem to be doing good things and try and get behind them. And that was really challenging and risky at the time. I guess the question about risk and generosity, it kind of depends who I'm pitching it to. I think if someone's coming from a community development background, then they understand the ideas of how do you listen to the community and really hear what they're trying to do rather than bring their own agenda.
Yeah.
But for someone coming from a kind of private sector commercial background, I think I talk about the parallels there. So if you're an investor and you've got a portfolio of investment, you put some of it in, I don't know, gold or things that are going to be less risky, and you put some of it into things that might pay off or that might crash. And when we're thinking about impact and giving, I think you take a similar portfolio approach that you fund some organizations who did some great things yesterday and so are going to do some great things tomorrow and so should get some money. But there's some who are brand new organizations who sound like they've got a fantastic idea, or there's a really entrepreneurial individual who looks like they might be about to take off, but they might not. And someone needs to fund those kinds of organizations too, for the payoff that you probably will get a 10% incremental benefit from funding these organizations over here, but you might get a 10 times, 20 times benefit for funding the person over here trying to do something new.
It's a very good point. And I suppose one of the things that we can't not talk about is just the challenges that are being faced by society at the moment with the coronavirus, and just, I suppose, the crisis immediately and the aftermath of that. So what's your feeling of what's needed and what support, who's in the most need, and where are the challenges going to come, or where are the challenges, and what do we need to do about it?
Gosh, there's so much uncertainty. Anybody who says they've got the answers to all that, I think is
that's
overly self-confident. But some of the things that I think we've seen, so that like the Community Foundation has been just the best place to be in this crisis, because there's been all that wave of community generosity that we've seen outpouring. The fact that I now have a WhatsApp group for my street that never existed before, and that people are collecting for the food bank and doing things that they've never done before, and that's replicated thousands and thousands of times across Northern Ireland in much more challenging areas than the street that I happen to live in. And the Community Foundation's been able to get behind that, and so it's given away hundreds and hundreds of grants, small grants to people who are, football clubs delivering hot meals, and organisations who work with older people delivering craft packages to people's houses and then collecting the craft and putting on a little online show of them. And so I come to the question, which is a super, the world is in a really challenging place, but I come with this sense of having been able to see the best of us and how the crisis has brought the best of us out. So I come with some optimism because of that, but also recognizing that it's the groups on the margins who are the people who've been most affected. And that's particular themes. So in Northern Ireland, the refugee and asylum seeking community, the LGBT community, the Black and ethnic minority community, again, communities who are in our society on the edge have been most affected. And that gap between rich and poor has become even more visible. And I've heard people who've been in community work all their lives say, see, when this crisis happened, I realized people in my neighborhood who were living on the brink, who I had no idea who had been living on the brink, and who began to need food packages and things, and I had no idea that those problems were there, and that those anecdotes having been multiplied up to the point that people taking a more strategic policy perspective are looking and going, gosh, this crisis has really shown us some of the cracks in the system that we didn't know were there. So I think that outpouring of generosity and that visibility of some of the challenges would be places I'd start in answering your question. There's all kinds of little discrete chunks, like how are we going to help kids go back to school? How are we going to deal with all the pent-up grief that people have been dealing with as they've lost loved ones and not been able to grieve properly for that? How we, there's loads of specific things in there, but.
Okay, well, I'm just thinking if we were to try to summarise, or maybe our last question, you mentioned justice at the very beginning, and I know that social justice is a very big thing for you. And I'm very conscious of the listeners who might be tuning in, who may be in a whole range of different jobs, might not be in the sector we're in, but have a feeling of wanting to be connected to something, or have a feeling on the back of this epidemic that they want to do something, or want to get involved in social justice. What would your advice be for people who have that sense of wanting to do something but are not sure where to start?
Well, it's such a lovely question. I feel like I have a kind of, there's a professional and a personal answer to it.
No, let's hear the personal one.
Okay. Well, the personal one being, particularly during this crisis, there's been a wave of people wanting to volunteer to do stuff. And my advice to anybody in that has been, listen, volunteering in this crisis doesn't look like going and working for the health service, or it looks like who on your street is the person who might be too proud to ask for help. And how do you make sure someone knocks on their door and checks if they're okay? Because in all the, government and everybody else they don't know that, but you know that in your street. So there's a micro answer to your question.
Like a locality, like a localism thing.
About who's your neighbour and how do you show some compassion and love to them. But my professional one is more. I was talking to somebody the other day who was coming from a commercial background and wanting to go and work in the charity world, and were really surprised to hear me say, "Listen, what's your commercial skill?" and go and sell that to the charity world. The charity world needs marketers and fundraisers and computer programmers and it doesn't need people who are just kind of, I want to do some good in the world. It needs skills, and so take whatever your professional skill is and go and find a slot where it can be used.
Brilliant, Andre. That's a great bit of advice, and I'm hoping some of the listeners will take that on board. And I just wanted to thank you for coming along today, and thank you for your honesty as always. I think you're a real honest leader, and I always enjoy chatting to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Maeve. It's been lovely.